Welcome to the RD2BE podcast. Each week we sit down with a different registered dietitian nutritionist to showcase the diversity of opportunity in the dietetics profession. Our aim is to dismantle the notion that there is a traditional career path. I'm Carl Barnes, the registered dietitian behind the scenes of RD2BE.
And I am Jenna Warnock, the RD2BE host. Our RD guests share their stories, career paths, and advice to help students like us succeed in the profession. Welcome back to another week of the RD2BE podcast. I'm your host, Jenna, and we're super excited to sit down for another episode. This is our third iteration of meeting with Dr. Jenna Stedman. Her background is in cognitive performance nutrition, and she is a great representation and example of how you can truly make dietetics your own when you do pass that RD exam, and how the world truly is your oyster. And so for those of you who may have not watched the first two episodes, Dr. Stedman is the director of cognitive performance nutrition for the Master Nutrition Lab, which she owns, and she also holds a doctorate in clinical nutrition and is a certified specialist in sports dietetics. And so we described in the first episode where Dr. Stedman came from, what her journey was in dietetics, and how, again, it took a lot of twists and turns to get to where she was today. And then our last episode was diving a little bit deeper into how students could use cognitive nutrition to their advantage in school, prepping for the RD exam, understanding what a cognitive performance event is. I was really excited and loved that episode. And now this episode, we're kind of hopping all over the place, but still with the same theme of how dietetics can truly be made your own with carving out your own niche. And that sounds super daunting, maybe really intimidating, thinking that, oh, I have to become a dietitian and now have everything else completely planned out even after that. But Dr. Stedman's here to help provide clarity, share her expertise and her own experience to help give you guys some advice and tidbits of whether or not performance nutrition is is what you want to explore, or clinical. We're just going to want to walk through different tips and tricks that you guys can use along the way. But Dr. Stedman, thank you so much for joining us yet again.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be back.
Yes. And so before we dive into how someone like what we mean by carving themselves out in dietetics, can you give like a bird's eye view of what each phase of a process would look like for someone to carve themselves out? Like, what does it mean when we say that?
Well, I want to preface it by saying that even when we pick a specialty or a niche or a target audience, anything like this, none of which is set in stone at all, right? At any point in your career, you can say, I want to do something different. And it doesn't even have to be for a good reason. Like, you can just want to do something different, and that's amazing, and you can do that. And that's, I think, at its core, the beauty of dietetics is that there is infinite career possibilities and changes and wonderful things that you can do, and all of it is helping people. So when you do start to look at, right, kind of what you're kind of most connected to, what your deep passion is, I think a lot of times you'll see, like quizzes online and like career path guides and things like that, that can sometimes point you in the right direction. But I have to say too, not everything is going to be laid out for you. Like, you're not going to be able to Google what should my niche be? What are all the possibilities? Like, what are all the careers a dietitian can do? Like, I know I was in that place. Like, when I was in undergrad, I was trying to think, different things that I could do, even just within the realm of sports dietetics, like all the different kinds of sports nutritionists, something like that. There's no way you can Google it. But the other fun part here is too, you can also make it up if you want to, which is what I ended up doing more recently. I had started, so if we haven't, listened to the first couple episodes, I started in tactical nutrition a little bit by accident, but I absolutely loved it and I stayed put for a while. That was a perfect meld of clinical and performance dietetics, and I highly recommend that world for anyone who wants to test that out. But in that process, right, being the dietitian, right, sometimes we're not going to be able to know on day one what you want to do. I think a lot of us too are coming from switched majors and returning to school and things like that. Like, you are not going to know what you want to do when you're 18. And that's perfectly fine. For the 5% of you out there that did know what you wanted to do when you're 18, I'm jealous of you. But we're not always going to know that from the beginning. So thinking about what like like the types of people that you want to help or the types of problems that you want to solve or the either the audience or the kind of world that you're passionate about, those can kind of point you in the right direction. Like that's how I got into sports and performance. But then even right within that world, you start working in it, and that's when you start to see like, ooh, I can identify this problem, I know how to solve that. Or I can identify this problem, I want to know how to solve that, right? I want to be the expert that everyone comes to. Um, and sometimes even in a little bit of vanity too, right? Like I get introduced on a podcast and I'm like amazed by myself that like if intern Jenna years ago could hear how I'm being introduced today, like she would faint. Like this is amazing, the stuff that I've done. So part of it too is really thinking about kind of not just the trajectory of your career, but the pieces that you want to like build up to that, right? We're not just thinking about, I just need to pass the test to be a dietitian. We're thinking about, as you look back on your career, what are all of the things that you want to do? And you don't have to pick one thing in any of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great starting point for just the overall theme that we want to set for this, where it's not carving yourself out in the sense of you're carving out stone that's not going to change at any point. It's more so like creating a space that's really flexible, really fluid, able to move with you throughout your career. And also, really appreciating and looking at it from an excitement standpoint and not so much a daunting task. Because you mentioned before the episode started where, hey, if you're happy in clinical as a clinical dietitian, there's no need to step outside, explore if that's not something that's calling to you. It's more so leaning into where you feel called towards. And so when it comes to the process of, say that someone is maybe in that thinking period where they're like, I do want to carve something out, but maybe as far as finding the right direction to go or where to start, where do you recommend someone starting if they want to figure out what's their niche?
Starting. It's so hard to find a starting place in the journey because I feel like if you ask any dietitian, like they're all going to come up with, right, a different starting point. I I think from my own experience, I
Mhm.
could say get your hands on, right, as much material as you can, right? Especially as an entry level dietitian. Read everything you can get your hands on, listen to every podcast, like, I mean, without stress, right? Like if you want to
Right.
enjoy your life, but like try to completely immerse yourself, right, in as much material as you can, because in that process, there will be, right, other people asking questions and other people talking about different scenarios or different populations that could spark an interest that you had no idea even existed. And that's how I kind of stumbled into cognitive performance, is that I found that in my job, I was and my service members, right, were asking a lot of questions about various degrees of cognitive performance and how they could eat or if they could eat for it, right? We didn't even know if we could. And then I went looking for it and there really wasn't a ton of answers. So it felt like that, it took me many years to get to that point, but that's how I kind of fell into this a little bit, is because it was something that was very interesting to me and I kind of found pieces of it. Like it was almost like there was clues, in the journey along the way. And now main character finally figures out the mystery at the end of the story. It's like, looking back, they were kind of all these clues. It's like, oh yeah, this is what I'm really interested in. And this is what, I want to teach everyone about. But at the same time, like I had to have enough of my own patients, my own service members asking these questions for me to realize like we need to come up with some more answers. We need to
Mhm.
find a little bit more in this.
Yeah, and
So,
it sounds,
yeah,
yeah, it sounds like where interest and gap overlap,
yeah.
where it's like, where do I feel drawn to? But where are there questions being asked and where is there a need for exploration further? And so when you carved out this niche of cognitive performance, you mentioned like in the first episode how just eating blueberries before an exam, that little bit is what made you start thinking about how nutrition can play a role in cognition. Is that where that seed was planted, or did you find that once you became a dietitian, that's when it really started getting the ball rolling?
I think, yeah, looking back, that was probably the initial seed.
Mhm.
Because I was always, as a student, I was always a B student. I was very self-conscious about my grades because I felt like everyone else in dietetics was like this just beautiful, like straight A student. And I felt like I was always one step behind. So I was always looking for anything that could help me kind of catch up. And to be fair, I wasn't that far behind. This was very much my own insecurity in my own head. Um, and so I was always looking for that extra edge, and it didn't ever occur to me to share that experience with anyone because I felt like, now hearing, you know, other colleagues talk about this and, other podcasts, things like this, it felt like, lots of other people felt this way in
Hmm.
school. It's very hard studying dietetics. And so I think if I had shared that a little bit more, maybe I wouldn't have felt so alone in that. But I think that was my kind of initial spark, kind of making that first connection with cognition and food. So sometimes that's true. We might not, we won't, don't even need to necessarily ask ourselves the very big questions about like, what is my deep burning passion? Like, what is my purpose in life kind of thing. It really can be like looking back and kind of piecing together, the puzzle pieces or those stepping stones of like, what has kind of added up to this point.
Hmm. No, and I think that's a great direction because it adds a point of introspection. And I think one thing that at least I run into is I can get stuck in my head a lot with analysis paralysis, where it's the balance of us wanting to provide tools so that people can know what things to think about and know what things to think about themselves in the past, but also that other side of the coin of balancing, okay, now what direction, what are you going to do with this? Like, how are you going to apply it? And I think you provided some great starting points, such as reading as much information as possible, kind of getting your hands on the literature, but again, without stressing yourself out. And I like how you said, hey, ask yourself, when did I do something, or what was something I've done, or what problem have I solved that's really lit me up? And I think that's a great thing to point out because you find direction based off of the actions that you've done. And yes, thinking, you do have to think about what you're doing in order to know what direction to go, of course. But ultimately, it's, that project that you did that you really enjoyed. It's that volunteer experience that you did that really filled your cup, or it's that job that you did and you were like, heck no, this is not what I want to do, that helped you kind of steer the other way.
Oh yeah.
And so a lot of it's very, action based that drives you. But still, I like how we're asking the right questions to ourselves as well, of being aware and conscious of those things that we're doing. Um, and going a bit more into the reading and the research side of things and being really intentional with it. You are a very big advocate, of course, for gathering knowledge, kind of getting as much information that your hands can get on. What strategies do you have for people who want to start, reading more or looking into things more? And I think you could use your approach to how you did it or things that you wish you did, but just because when someone hears, oh, like gather the literature or read more, that can also be daunting. And so, what ways can we kind of piece it
Oh
apart
yeah.
and make it seem more approachable?
I wish I had done this in undergrad. I started a little bit too late. Being part of being part of any kind of like bigger book club group can sometimes be helpful because right then someone, right, usually senior dietitian, someone who maybe has a little bit more time, they're kind of doing that initial comb through, be like, okay, like what books are most exciting? Like you could do like there's journal clubs out there too. What articles, what journals, things like that, we're reading this month. So that's can be sometimes a good starting point. Yeah, if you were to hear me say like just go start reading more books, there's so much out there. So it's very hard to know exactly where to start with that. And anyone in like the sports nutrition realm, I can at least plug this. The
Hmm.
ASPDA is the Association for Sport. Oh, yeah, no, we just changed it. Association for Sports and Professional. Messed it up again. We just changed the name of it, so I'm gonna mess it up a bunch. You can cut this out if you
I'm
need
gonna
to.
look it up. Yeah, it's American
Yeah,
Sports and Performance Dietitians Association.
that's yes, Sports and Performance Dietetics Association. Thank you. Their book, so I run their book club. So selfish plug here, but I run their book club. So I spend time every month look, looking at, what new books have come out, what's written by a dietitian. That's our first clue. And then I compile, the book list for the year, with, approval from ASPDA. And now, so every month we go through and we read a different book and we discuss it together. And there's two different dates and the whole thing. So that can be a really good opportunity if you're interested, right, in sports. Like that's something to join. But that's, there's any number of different associations will have different opportunities like that. Um, Sometimes even just listening to like various podcasts, like not just this one, as amazing and wonderful as it is, excellent starting point. There are a lot of really good podcasts out there.
Hmm.
Look for, again, ones by dietitians, and they will oftentimes talk about like new books coming out, like new, like things like that. Like the sports, what is it? The sports nutrition, the handbook for professionals. We've had the sixth edition for I don't even know how many years. I think I bought that in grad school, so quite a while. The seventh edition is being released this summer. So like that's something like everyone's talking about. We're all excited to have the new edition. So things like that, like you will be able to find a lot of those kind of starting place books and journals and things like that from other dietitians who are kind of already combing through everything. So if you don't know where to start, starting with, another book club or another dietitian's recommendation, that can be a really good starting point.
And I think that's a good call to getting involved with organizations. And it's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense of you're learning more knowledge, but you're also networking and you're staying connected to people too in the process. And I think that's something, again, you mentioned, oh, you wish that you started sooner. And same thing with networking. A thing that I commonly hear from podcast guests is that they wish that they started networking sooner or they wish they started talking to people sooner. And I think that's also a great if you don't know what to talk to maybe a dietitian about, or you have the opportunity to talk to dietitians, that's a great question to ask them is what resources would you recommend me start with for learning more about X topic, or what podcasts do you recommend? I know that you have a list of certain books that you recommend for students and interns. And I think, well, one, have them in the description, obviously, but you're more than welcome to read off certain ones or maybe highlight certain ones, but it's up to you as far as how you want to introduce those books as far as recommendations go.
Oh yeah. And to backtrack to networking, anyone
Yes.
not on LinkedIn is missing out. That is something that I truly regret because in undergrad, I remember as one of our like senior courses, it was like one of our projects was to like set it up. And I genuinely did. I set it up. I, got my grade on the assignment and then I forgot about it for the longest time. And I only kind of rejoined that networking community like I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And I feel like I missed like the whole first half of my career because I mean, that's a fantastic spot to not only just like kind of like, I don't want to say blindly network, but like you could connect with any dietitian on there and it's like, they're not going to say no. It's LinkedIn. But then once you're connected, right, you're getting all of their like, if they just read a book, if they just went to a conference, if they're on a podcast, you're going to get all of those recommendations. You're going to have this feed of dietitians, of healthcare professionals, right? It's not just dietitians, like all of these healthcare professionals that you are connected with, and they are going to be giving all of these recommendations about all of these things that they are doing and they're experiencing. It's a lot of conferences and stuff like that too, but that's one of the easiest kind of introvert networking that I can recommend because you don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to. Like that's
No,
fine.
yeah, and I have something else to add to that as well is LinkedIn, I can confirm LinkedIn is amazing and it's great for just casting your fishing line out. And worst case, no one responds. Best case, you just have a really great connection. And it's also a good way to brainstorm if you don't know what niche you're interested in. You can type in like dietitian blank blank, like
Yeah.
just to see if it exists and just to see if someone is in a niche that you're interested in. Because a lot of times, if you just type in like dietitian and then whatever specialty, you see a slew of people who are maybe not directly in that specialty, but their title somewhat relates to that. And so if you're interested in research, seeing what type of research dietitians are out there, or if you're interested in performance, you can get even more granular to not just performance nutrition, but again, like first responder nutrition or the cognitive performance nutrition. I feel like LinkedIn's a great place not only for networking, getting book recommendations, but also seeing all the different types of dietitians out there. But yeah, LinkedIn plug.
Oh yeah,
Um,
no, absolutely. And I too, I have had people like message me on LinkedIn, very brave, right? So I love when they do this. They message me on LinkedIn and be like, "Hey, I searched military dietitian, you popped up. Can you tell me about your job?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's amazing. I do all of these things. Like, what else do you want to know?" And they're like, "This is great. Can I come shadow you for the day?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So we get permission, we bring them on base. Like it was so fun. So I mean, I've found a lot of my like virtual interns, like people trying to get their internship done, they'll search dietitian in whatever. I'll pop up and be like, "Hey, can you take interns for 5 weeks?" Like, absolutely. Most of the time, most of the time I'm available to take. I
Careful
know
what
I
you.
shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say always because I can't say a yes to 100 interns. But like that, I mean, that's how a lot of interns find me, and they're like, "Hey, I need 5 weeks of whatever rotation." I'm like, "Absolutely, like, let's make it work. Let's do it." Um, but sorry, I got sidetracked. So books. I will start with some of my like more recent favorites, and then I'll talk about sports nutrition. I got most of the list is sports nutrition because that's my specialty. But all right, let me see. What do I want to start with here? I will plug most recently, actually, I read Live Nourished by, and I hope I don't mispronounce her name, Shauna Minnie Spence. MSRD, fa unbelievably fantastic book. And it's a short read too. Like you could knock it out over a long weekend. It's wonderful. Um, Talking about diet culture and how we kind of interpret like our food environment, how we talk about like the language that we use with food. And it is written for everyone. So this is a book that I not only recommend to all of my dietitian friends, but also all of my amazing interns and students. And then I tell them, right, tell all of our regular humans, tell the general population, tell everyone about this book because the way we talk about food, dietitian or not, it impacts every bit of our life and every bit of our health. And so that was my most recent read. I absolutely fell in love with it. It was so well written. Um, and the best, right? You don't need to be a dietitian to read it and to benefit greatly from it. Um, on a more clinical note, my very favorite nutrition book of all time is Nutrition for Brain Health and Cognitive Performance. Absolutely written for a dietitian or like this is not a Gen Pop book. Um, Two brilliant nutrition scientists have wrote this. Talitha Best and Louise Dye. It is shorter, but it is dense. I'm talking about like unbelievable citations in this, which I mean, something for me as like I've said this before. I'm not nice to my book. I write all over all my books, so like that book is one that I've gone through. I circle all of the citation, like all the studies that I'm interested. I go back to the back. I follow, like I read through all of those studies. I'm able to like cite them in my own work, which is fantastic. But that book is so thorough and so well written. It breaks down every bit of kind of I think it actually was it published like 2015 or 2018, but up to that point, all of the most recent data that we had on brain health and cognitive performance most specifically. So, yes, it does address Alzheimer's and dementia and eating patterns that impact those, but it also talks about immediate cognitive health, which I have not found in any other books. So that was one that I read in the last couple of years, and I was so excited to come across that. So if someone is listening and is interested in cognitive performance specifically, because I think I'm the only dietitian doing this, and you want to join the club, please read this and email me, and I want to talk about it with you. Um, the other books on my list, which you'll see the whole list in the show notes when everyone reads that, because they will definitely do that. Motivational interviewing in nutrition and fitness is one that we had to read for undergrad, but it's one that I come back to. I come back to it every couple of years because it gives you specific scripts and not necessarily that you need to copy, like memorize these things word for word, but every so often as a practicing dietitian, you will find that you can sometimes get into a little bit of a routine with like, and it's so helpful to um assist in like creating new questions and creating like new conversations in your not necessarily the clinical assessment part, but in the counseling part. So kind of once you get past that, like we're doing all the good foundation stuff, we're doing all the performance stuff, and you're kind of past that bit in your consult phase, consult sessions. Once you're past that phase of like the education part, once you get into the really like the deep counseling part of like we're maintaining this and we're talking about all of those things, that can be very, very helpful. So that's one that I always have on hand, and I kind of flip through it every once in a while. Once I kind of catch myself saying the same things over and over, that one's very helpful to have. That one's by Clifford and Curtis. Um, all right, and then everything sports nutrition related. Um, so two books that I read in undergrad that I have had on my shelf that are like my nutrition Bibles have been Sports Nutrition for Endurance Athletes by Monique Ryan. Her fourth edition actually just came out. So I had the third edition, which is like just bent to pieces because I used it so much. I used to like cite this in school projects. It was just amazing. And then of course, like Nancy Clark's Sports Nutrition Guidebook. Both of these are, while they are perfectly written for dietitians, of course, anyone can pick up any of these. So these are both books that I have recommended to like PTs and ATs and strength coaches, especially anyone working in the sports or performance world. You're going to get questions about nutrition, right? Just like we get questions about exercise and injuries and like all of these things going on. So there's this beautiful overlap of like, here's a book that'll at least help you answer some questions, but also tell you where you need to refer to a dietitian, which is another soapbox I'll save for another day of where people need to be referring to us. But those are two books that I feel very confident in recommending to absolutely anyone, but especially others working in the sports performance world. Um, we talked about the handbook for professionals. That's a classic. Anyone studying for the CSSD, right? The certification sports, God, certified specialist in sports dietetics.
We got
If
it.
you are entry level dietitian, you are excited that you're working in sports, you want to have that advanced credentialing, which I highly recommend. The test is no joke. So like the RD exam, that's a hurdle in itself. These advanced certifications are no joke. But that book, that's probably our best way to prep for something like that. So I would comb through that and do your best to really understand the big concepts within that. Um, and then let's see. Lauren Link has two books out, and I recommend both of them, but for different reasons. So nutrient timing, I would recommend to any of like our like current athletes, right? You're in your sport, you're in season, you understand kind of that base level of like these are what carbohydrates are, these are what proteins are. This is kind of that beautiful second level of like this is how we apply all of those things. This is how we get into the details of it. Her first book, oh, I'm gonna completely blank on what it's something along the lines of like God, what is it called? I'm gonna blank on I'll have to look that up and it'll be in the show notes. I apologize. I forget what it's called. It wasn't on my list, but it's also excellent. It's written for anyone who is like was a college athlete, was a high school athlete, is now transitioning to what we call being a regular human. So thinking about right how we transition kind of in and out of sport.
Is it the healthy former athlete?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's so embarrassing that I forgot that. I read that book in school, right? When did I get that? In grad school, and I was like, wow, I wish I had this a couple years ago.
And
So that
yeah,
one's also excellent. But right, anything by Lauren Lank, she's fantastic and part of ASPDA. So I have to absolutely plug all of her work. Her books are fantastic. There are other ones too that have been on my list. Like The Athlete's Gut is very helpful to read. And things like Fiber Fueled. Like Fiber Fueled is written by a gastroenterologist, I believe, and not a sports dietitian, but it is correct and applicable to sports dietetics, certainly, right? Because we have a lot of athletes coming in with different like gut issues, and sometimes sports can even cause that. There's a level of stress in there. So sports or not, I think fiber fueled is a great one for all dietitians to at least have a good concept of. Like we all know what fiber is and what it does, but to be able to explain it in a little bit of a higher level than sometimes of what we, depending on, our foundational understanding of it from school, that is a great book to kind of pick through, which is really fun. Other fun ones that I really liked. Oh, The Mind Diet by Maggie Moon. She just came out. I think the second edition just came out too. That one's excellent. Really good, really good. Not just summary, but it's a really thorough explanation of how we kind of came to the almost like the conclusion, this recommendation of the new Mind diet, which is the combination of Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, which have been successes in and of themselves, but after all this research, we found that it does fantastic things for our brain. So that is one that I certainly recommend. Also, that's a shorter one, which is nice. So that's again, right? You could knock it out in a long weekend and just absorb some good nutrition knowledge
Hmm.
over a long weekend, which is lovely. There's other ones too. If we want to include the full list, that's fine. I don't have to talk about every single one, but things like the nutrition and diagnosis related care, that was just one that I had used so much during school. And I have found that I still often refer to that in consults if I have some, maybe a clinical condition that I hadn't come across or something I'm not an expert in. Like that is a very good starting place. And I used that one a lot actually when I was studying for the RD exam. So that actually might be a good one for anyone who is studying for that exam, but you're not sure maybe what your specialty is yet. You're not even thinking about that yet. That is a good place. Also, you could probably flip through that and think, oh, I'm interested in this, I'm not interested in this, and maybe figure some things because that one's again, that's it's the dictionary of diagnosing, so it's thorough. It's got everything in there. So that actually, that now that I think of it, that would be a great place to start too if we're thinking about niching down a little bit. Um, I think that was everything on my list. Oh, plant-based sports nutrition. That's another good one too. I think everyone knows about that book. That's been around for so long. That's a good one to have because in any world of sports performance, you are going to get at least one plant-based of some kind athlete, and it is good to know more so than let's just focus on protein. There's a lot going on there. So that's a really helpful. I keep it on my shelf just as a resource. It's good to double check things. So that's another good one too. But
Yeah. And I like how it all kind of went back to the, you started with the niches in sports dietetics, and then, you have some books where you can use this as a reference for if you don't know what you're interested in to dive deeper into that from that perspective. And one question I have is with all these books, how did you come across them?
how did I originally come across these? Um, I think I think a lot of them I had initially Google searched for, which might not be my best recommendation, but again, like I in undergrad, oh my God, Amazon was first to think. I'm so Amazon was first. So this is before Amazon was evil. They need to pay their workers. Anyways, no, when Amazon was first a thing and it was just like book world, I was obsessed with it. So you could just search nutrition, like nutrition sports, like nutrition, whatever, and it would give you like all these different options. And then I would look through each one of these books and I would think like, is it interesting to me, first of all? And then second of all, I would think like, is it written by a dietitian? That is always the criteria for a nutrition book. Is it written by a dietitian? And that's why I'm always hesitant to put books on my list that are not written by a dietitian, like Fiber Fueled, right? Fantastic book, not written by a dietitian though. So you have to read it with a grain of salt. He writes it from the perspective of a gastroenterologist and not a dietitian making specific nutrition recommendations. So I thought that was very important. There's a little bit of that because you can't really talk about the gut without talking about food. But um, I'm very, very hesitant. I don't know if I've ever recommended a nutrition book written by an MD. They don't study nutrition, which is fine. They don't need to, but they need to refer to us. back on my soapbox. But like that there has to be your own personal criteria for like what books are going to resonate with you. And for me, I stand very firm on nutrition books need to be written by dietitians. So I would go on like the early days of Amazon and just search. That's where I think I found a lot of these from. And then, right, finally, I catch up to social media. I catch up to LinkedIn, and now I'm in network with either book clubs or other senior dietitians, sometimes even the authors themselves. That's really exciting. I feel like I'm like friends with a famous person, but like you can connect with a lot of these authors, and then you'll be right first to know that a fourth edition is coming out. Like they're speaking at an event, a new book is coming out. They're part of a book club. So there's a lot of ways to kind of create your own kind of book list out of it.
Yeah, and one recommendation I also have because I love reading, but then sometimes books are expensive, is the website Thrift Books. I
Yes.
highly recommend because you also mentioned how you like to annotate your books. Like especially if it's a dense book, not being afraid, and I had to get over this, like not being afraid to just scribble and write because what I had to ask myself is, am I getting the biggest bang for my buck out of reading this book by keeping it clean? Or will I get a better return on investment
Yeah.
for scribbling all over, highlighting, like circling, earmarking, not obliterating the book, but just using it to the best, maximizing those $5, $10 that you spend on thrift books. And that's just one recommendation that I have. And I think you provide a great starting point too for just start researching. And I like how you made these books action oriented. Like it's not just you're acquiring all of this knowledge and then it's all stored up in your noggin. It's very much use these as starting points to reach out to people, to start with book clubs, to stay up to date with the research. But then how are you going to apply that research that you've stayed up to date with? How you read a lot of these in undergrad, which was really great, like kind of starting early with acquiring your knowledge and reading some books. Um, and kind of segueing that too with the student perspective is, yeah, like how would you recommend students apply what they learn and kind of use this knowledge that they're reading about either in the classroom or just things that they have to think about when they become dietitians, just kind of thinking now in that application sense.
Oh, absolutely. From a student or intern perspective, I would say when you are reading about a topic or reading about a specific thing, think about how that can apply to the work that you're doing. And sometimes that can be tricky, but I know I always recommend this to my interns is like study clinical when you're in that rotation, study food service when you're in that rotation. Um, and and that's why I try to like the best we can like find books that are close to topics that like you're in courses for. You don't need to try to find your niche before you pass the RD test. Like you can start looking, make a list certainly, but like you don't need to be reading about sports nutrition while you're taking like cycle or something like that. Like focus on what you're doing to try to get as much of that knowledge as you can. If you spread yourself too thin, or if you try to like as a student, like this is maybe something that I wish I hadn't have done, is as a student, I went in with a little blindfoldedness, like coming in thinking like I don't need to know about renal or like any of these things because I'm not going to work in that. I'm just going to work in sports. Well, okay, I mean it's not every day, but there is certainly an overlap between, renal. I mean, there could always be a renal patient that's also like doing, like I should not have shut off that information so quickly. And luckily, I refound my love for clinical, so all that information ended up getting used again. But I think in school that was something that I a little bit made that mistake of was thinking that like I found my thing and this is going to be it because I super didn't. That was very close-minded to think that I knew what I was doing. Um, so when you're in certain classes, pick through either like your to be read pile or your book list and think, okay, what books would be good to kind of pair with either the rotation that I'm in or the school that I'm in. I mean, focus on schoolwork first. Don't overwhelm yourself with reading. But pairing things together like that can sometimes be easier. Once you're an RD and you're in practice, this is my favorite thing to do. So how I write all of my clinical notes is I take whatever notes I had from the previous session, I copy and paste into a new file. So that's like this week's note versus last week. And so when I do that, if I am reading something this week and I come across I don't know, some nutrient deficiency that I see, the symptoms of that align with something that, someone's complaining about from last week. I will take that information and I will open their note from last week and I will preemptively make a new note for this week and put all of that in there so that when I go into the session this week, I have it in there already to say, okay, B12, it looks like, you're talking about these things. Let's get tested because I think this might be going on. That's just an example. Like it can be for any number of things, but I will, because I will forget if I don't write it down. And I know that about myself. So I know that if I put it in this week's note, it will be waiting there for me and all of the correct information will already be in there. So that's something that I do that works very well for me in practice. For others, it may be enough to just like underline and leave the book out, or some people can honestly just make a literal mental note of something and remember it and come back to it. My brain doesn't quite work that way. I'm very much a write it down or forget it kind of person. That's why I write in all of my books. Like if I write a note next to it or put a star next something, I'm much more likely to remember that thing than if I just read it and tell myself, oh, I'm going to come back to this. I never come back to it. I don't know. Like, I am so impressed with people who can remember things like that. But yeah, if I immediately write it into the patient's note for the next week, I know that I'm right immediately applying that new knowledge. And it
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah, and I think that also applies like to students. Like say that you're
Yeah.
going over something in a lecture and say that the lecture slide just has one bullet point about this thing that is so fascinating to you, and then it's like, okay, next. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What
Yeah.
did you just mention?
Yeah.
For me, that was the fact that visceral adipose tissue is metabolically active. When I learned about that, and then my professor was like, next, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I was like,
Wait a second.
I was
Yeah.
like, what do you mean fat is more than just sitting there? And that's that was my aha. Like, wait, I want to know more about this. And
Yeah.
that little seed in my seed, and I didn't have that until my senior year. I had no idea what I was gonna do. I mean, who does? Exactly. Like who yeah. So me having my and this was my also my last semester of my senior year that I saw this lecture slide and I was like, wait. And so that's now led me to my dissertation topics covering like visceral adipose tissue, and it's looking at a whole bunch of other things, but one of the cores of it is where my first wait a minute was. And then I dive deeper into it. I like, you pay attention to the cues that your brain gives you, whether it's, as you're a student or when you're reading as a practicing dietitian with your patients. And so I think you can apply yourself with the books that you read in any part of the journey and just really taking advantage of like what your internal dialogue is telling you.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so
Oh, I'm so glad you said that because you will find like anyone listening, you will find the same thing if you read like the more clinical type of books. Like I was talking about the sports nutrition handbook for professionals will do this, and what was the other nutrition and brain health and cognitive performance. They will state at the end of, the summary of the disease or summary of what, whatever they're talking about, they will say right at the bottom, more research is needed. And that is your big clue. Like you can circle that and say, okay, I'm going to do that then. There's my moment. Like that someone has already said, wait a second, we need more here. Because
mhm.
they just summarize everything we know so far. And so if you're going through that and saying, hey, there's the gap, and I'm interested in figuring out what it is, that's it. That's your clue. So I've not once come back to any of these, but I've circled probably a million of those being like, oh yeah, I'm going to come back and research. I'm not doing research. But like I've circled so many of those being like, I want to find the answer to that. And I hope better people are out there doing the real research. But like I circle all of those being like, that's something that we absolutely need to know more about.
Yeah, and it's honestly like whether or not I mean, I'm a bad spokesperson for this because I'm in a PhD program, but research is something that you do in any field, whether you're just doing not just But whether you are doing a master's degree, your dietetic internship, you're doing a doctorate program, you're an undergrad student, you are researching. It's mainly just, are you making the most and optimizing the time that you're doing when you're researching? And it goes back to finding that overlappage between interest and gap. Like that's where you fall as a student when you become a dietitian, is what will you be doing? And again, it doesn't have to be anything super profound, groundbreaking in the sense of I have to change the world just with myself. It could be what starting small and making it attainable. And I think that we've talked about a lot of great steps as far as like what books to read, how to approach reading, how to pair it with the classes that you're taking to make the most bang for your buck, how to actually apply it and not just, scribble over books and not have it apply anywhere, like definitely providing direction from it. And the last thing that I wanted to cover is different prompts or like thought experiments that people could have and just check in with themselves every, 6 months to a year on ways that they can know, am I moving in the direction that I want to be moving into? Because you mentioned, like, for example, with that motivational interviewing book, you can notice yourself maybe being on autopilot until you kind of do that self check. And so what do you have any prompts that people should ask themselves every 6 to 12 months to do that check-in of, hey, am I on autopilot? Am I moving in the right direction? Just so that students can have a good starting point for knowing where they're at and where to move forward with the stuff that we've talked about.
Oh yeah. So I thought about this for a while because I knew I had written this somewhere, and I went back to like old journals and school notebooks because I can't throw anything out. I worked hard on those things. I can't throw them out. But I went back looking for them because I know I wrote this down somewhere, but I couldn't for the life of me find it. But I had at several points in my career tried to kind of organize my thoughts of like what type of dietitian I want to be. I can't imagine I threw it out, so I don't know where it went. But this is what I think I remember is at least a lot of the questions that I had kind of gone through in my career so far. So the first one was, ask yourself, when have I felt most energized or alive or joy, right? When solving a problem. And what was it about that situation that brought out the best in me, right? So not just thinking about like, oh, I really like that assignment because I got an A on it, right? Like I was an environmental science major before I was a nutrition major. I got an A on a lot of stuff. We were studying rocks. And I did, oh, to be fair, I did that for 1 year. I was not at all like environmental science is a real thing. I'm not making fun of it by any means, but like I did like the first year of courses where you're just looking at rocks. It's easy stuff. But so don't just look at assignments where, you got an A or it was really easy for you, something like that. Think about not just assignments in school, but also times outside of school where maybe you had a great conversation with someone that you were surprised about, or someone asked you a question because they know you're a nutrition major or something like that. Like, think about any time that you were really excited to talk about something. And that might be a good clue for you. The second one is, what kind of impact do I generally want to have on people? Or, and this can also be like systems or the world. I know sometimes we dream really big and we want to change the world. Who do I most want to impact, or who do I most want that impact to be for? So this is then thinking about the people, or even, right, you're right. So everyone will say, like in the business world, they'll say your target audience, right? Like who are you speaking to? Who are you writing for? And think about sometimes what helps too is think about the people who most need help. And that was something that really spoke to me when I was kind of making the decision between collegiate sports and tactical, because to me, and this is not, again, everyone makes right very different decisions, and none of them are wrong by any means. But to me, I felt more drawn towards tactical because I felt that our service members, and especially
Mhm.
because I interned for the VA, like our veterans, I wanted to give that population the very best care. I wanted to be part of that solution for them. And so that was something that spoke to me versus collegiate sports were not speaking the same way to me. I felt like college students and the college sports kind of world, I felt like they had a lot of attention, and Division 1, all the things, like they have a lot of fun, they have all those things. Not to say that the military doesn't have money, but I felt like that population didn't speak to me the same way that the tactical population did. So that was something that I had really journaled on a bit when I had first passed my RD exam and was applying to jobs, which you hear a little bit of that story. I think we talked about in episode 1 or 2
Hmm.
a little bit more. But something certainly to think about is what people do you want to help the most can sometimes help answer that question. And then the third one to think about, if I were not concerned with money, status, or like other kind of bigger expectations, what problems would I want to spend my days working on? And I really liked this one, and I had spent a little bit of time toying with the idea of like working for nonprofits a little bit. And this was before I actually passed my RD exam because there's a little gap when I didn't get an internship where I was, nutrition undergrad and I had that under my belt, but I wasn't getting an internship and I was thinking about grad school. I was also thinking about working for nonprofits because I felt like that was in a lot of aspects, those were populations that I desperately wanted to help, but they didn't always require you to be an RD. Like you could go and do a lot of like food service kind of things that would be, very fulfilling to me. But you didn't necessarily have to be a dietitian to fulfill
Hmm.
those roles, which I thought would have been a very possible career path for me. So thinking about, right, but also too though, when I say if you were not concerned with money or status or anything, at the end of the day, we do need to get paid too. So
Right.
also dietitians, think about and do not Google what dietitian makes the highest amount of money. That's not how we pick our career. But also think about what type of life and lifestyle that you want to have. So I know when I was looking at collegiate and tactical is very much a 9 to 5 day. We did weekends and stuff like that, but like collegiate, you very possibly have, right? Early morning sessions and stuff during the day and late night things and traveling for games and tournaments, very long. Like the hours are very different. It doesn't always have to be. It can be different depending on, the team and the program, but oftentimes it's a very different world as to what you're signing up for. Um, so think about also, right, the lifestyle that you want to have and the money that goes along with it.
Hmm.
So some professions, some parts of sports nutrition pay quite a bit. They pay a very livable salary and it's amazing. And others require a master's degree and then pay you like, just the most abysmal, like just the most abysmal salary, like, or they pay you hourly, or like, like just, and I think we have a lot of good people fixing that and a lot of good people speaking out about that, especially now that our master's degree is required, which I am fully on board for. I love having more, I'm all for more education. But think about also too, well, first we think about if money didn't matter, what would you want to do? Also then second guess that and think about what will matter to you, right? Because money does absolutely play a part in this. We can't all, work for nothing. We've been in school for a long time. We are the nutrition experts. We deserve to be paid for that time. So certainly, standing up for yourself and advocating for that is also very important within this, concept of thinking about where your career wants to go and where your niche is going to be and who you want to help. That's certainly a factor.
No, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you touched on pay in the context of still doing what you want to do. And we do have two episodes, actually, one with Trenton Voss and one with Dr. Rayan Abu Saba, where they both go over negotiating salary and they both go over how you should never take what's offered on the table first go around, like always negotiate. And Dr. Abu Saba does a great job also going into how to calculate what's a good salary based off of the location that you're in, how much you're commuting, what the insurance benefits are. Like she does a very great deep dive into very number driven based how to calculate whether or not a certain job is fit for you. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, and also advocating for yourself and how we are moving in a positive direction. And I think those prompts are all such great starting points that I think every student should ask themselves, and I think definitely write down, because you want to see then over time how it changes, how it evolves, that you're staying on track with it as you read more things. How does it change? How does it shift? I think very much staying on tap with who it is you are and who is it that you want to be. So I think those are great prompts to send students off with. And thank you again for taking the time to share so many great pieces of knowledge and information. And any last things or parting stuff?
Uh, I don't know. Last word. I feel like I gave some good last words last
No,
time.
yeah.
I don't know if I'll repeat them. I think everyone go back and listen to previous episodes because I had some good last words last time of basically always give yourself a little bit more credit because you would I talk to my students interns about this all the time. It's like you would never go like if someone asked you, you would never go back to like where you were a year ago or 2 years ago. Like you have done so much good work in that time, any time span, right? You would never go back and undo things. So in the sense of finding your niche and finding your career path, like never think that, oh, I did so many years in this specialty and now I want to do something else that was wasted. It's never wasted time. Never is it wasted time. And even so, right, you might have like gotten your master's degree in one area and now you want to apply that to somewhere else. Like again, like that education is never wasted. That is always an amazing investment in yourself. So always give yourselves a little bit more credit.
Absolutely. And so thank you so much, Dr. Stedman, for spending, again, so much time helping students carve out their niche, know what resources to look for, questions to ask themselves. Again, if you haven't watched the other two episodes, they cover very different topics, but also relating to like performance, cognition, nutrition, personal, professional development, all those good things. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.